Hello and welcome back to another episode. Now today marks the 15th anniversary, 15 years since the seminal work Spirited Away was released to the world. This masterpiece from the mind of Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli really is one of the most important animated films that I've ever seen. And it's also one of those films which lots of people are downright evangelical about. I rarely meet someone who's seen Spirited Away who doesn't love it, or indeed doesn't go on to recommend it to other people. I recommend it myself, and indeed so does my wife, to anyone who is remotely interested in a good animated movie. Now, I'm losing my voice. I've got a summer cold, it's really annoying, but I simply had to talk today about this film. My introduction to Spirited Away actually started with my job in Blockbuster back in the day when I was working there. The film came out in 2001, and around 2002, 2003, it was sort of entering my sphere of consciousness, you know. Certainly the other Studio Ghibli films were sort of floating around, and I was aware of how great the quality of this animation was, but I didn't actually pick it up. I didn't actually give the film a go until a couple of years later, when someone quite literally put it in my hand and said, "You need to watch this film. Watch it. You'll love it." And, you know, with some trepidation, largely because I was so busy, you know, at uni, I was writing essays, I was studying very hard. I sort of thought to myself, do I really have time for this? But I started watching the film, and I didn't regret it at all. Strangely enough, though, I did find the experience initially quite difficult. Going through from scenario to scenario in this film, I found a little bit jarring at first, and I think that's part of the beauty of the film, is the fact that it is spirited away. You're being whisked off your feet along with the main character, our hero Chihiro, the 10-year-old girl at the centre of this story. But I didn't really fully appreciate that the first time I watched it. So there were certain points when I sort of left the film. I sort of paused it or stopped it and went away and came back a couple of days later. But I think that is the whole point of this film. It is an incremental journey, and it is actually a journey of growth and about self-discovery in some of the best ways for a few different characters, actually. Now, Miyazaki himself actually was inspired to make this film when he stayed with some friends and their children at his mountain cabin, supposedly. He saw how the life of a young girl, especially a 10-year-old girl, is quite complicated. How actually they have this sense of apathy to the world because they're not yet major players, they're not adults, they don't have, you know, they can't have independence yet. But also as well, so much of the stuff which is marketed at them isn't quite for them. For example, magazines which are all about romance and you know, and your latest crush, this kind of thing. When you're 10, you're not quite there yet, and so he saw that actually there was something there, that there was a place, there was a niche, if you will, for something which would actually cater for girls at that time. And so Chihiro, in so many ways, is a very typical 10-year-old girl. She is slightly apathetic, she's slightly powerless at the beginning of the film, and to really underline this, she's being taken forcibly, as it were, to a new life. The family is moving home. A little bit like the scenario in My Neighbour Totoro. We have a family moving to a new area and a girl having to adapt to that, having to consider what's my life going to be like next. And the fact that is actually quite scary. This is sort of all underlined and introduced to us in a very mundane realism. The animation at the beginning of this film is beautifully realistic. The make of the car, the fact that it is an Audi Quattro, the fact that that you have the electric windows, the way the wind affects the flowers that Chihiro's holding, everything feels really quite realistic and boring. And that's the point. That's exactly where Chihiro is. She's bored and she's a little bit scared. Now they see off in the corner, and incidentally, I'm not going to spoil the whole film here, but it's worthwhile just talking a little bit about the story. They see off in the corner, up on the hill, the house that they're moving to, and Dad decides to take a shortcut through the forest. He goes, "Yeah, we can get there. I'm sure we can get there through this forest." And because he has this 4-wheel drive car, he feels very overconfident, and they go rushing through the forest. And quickly everything starts to feel a little bit out of control. All the bags and the things in the car are sort of rattling. Even the car itself is rattling as they go a bit too quick on this cobbled road. And in the forest, Chihiro starts to see shrines, abandoned shrines whizzing by. A statue, a beautiful, big rounded statue in amongst the trees, covered in moss. And you get this sense that everything's a bit mysterious. They're entering this, or beginning to enter, the hinterland of a different world. Suddenly they're forced to stop when they come to a big red gatehouse, and her parents, once again being very curious, very confident, essentially wander in. And Chihiro, against her better judgment, follows them. They make their way into what appears to be an abandoned theme park, and across a dry riverbed, and up to this food market, this sort of stall where these beautiful foods have been laid out. And again, her parents, especially her dad, is very arrogant and says, "I've got money, I've got credit cards, let's just eat and we'll pay when the owner gets back." Now, something's not quite right. This place seems to be abandoned, but there's food available. Chihiro doesn't rush to get involved. Instead, she goes wandering, and she comes across a great big bathhouse, again in this supposedly abandoned theme park. On the bridge, she meets a young man called Haku, who instantly looks alarmed and worries her, but also is very concerned to get her out. He tells her, he warns her, "Leave, quick, go before it gets dark, go now." So she rushes back down the steps towards where her parents are. Night is falling, the lights are coming on, and these spirit-like grey creatures, these sort of shadows with long limbs, are wandering through the streets with red glowing eyes. It's all a bit scary, but not nearly as scary as the fact that when she gets back to where her parents are, they've literally become pigs. They were pigging out, and now, because they were eating this food which wasn't meant for them, they have become pigs. Now, actually, only a couple of days ago, Studio Ghibli confirmed that this is furthering the metaphor of the theme park. This idea that in the late 80s, Japan became very greedy, very much like a pig, and then suffered when the economy went bad in the early 90s. That's literally what the dad in the movie says when he said, this is a theme park, this must have gone bankrupt, in the early 90s. And so it is very much a metaphor for Japanese society at the time. In that sense, it's quite clever. But Chihiro is suddenly on her own. She's suddenly been thrust into precisely the situation that she didn't want to be in. The river has risen. That dry riverbed has become essentially a small lake, in fact quite a large lake, and across the water is coming an old-style steamboat, Mississippi style, and disembarking from that boat is a whole array, a menagerie of imaginative and amazingly exotic gods and spirits, and essentially Japanese traditional costume, just coming off the boat, and they're all going to the bathhouse because that's where they go to relax. So she finds herself in this world, and so do we. And this is one of those points where I had to stop the film for a bit. It's because I was just as taken aback as she is, and in that sense, the film manages it so well. We're given that boring, mundane, incredibly realistic introduction, and then when you're introduced to this realistically animated but completely bizarre, completely new, completely different, fresh, strange world, you can't dismiss it. You're already invested in the reality of this situation, so you're confused, as is she. And actually, really, when I saw there was a bird flying in the air with an old woman's head, I didn't know what it was at that point. I was like, I need to pause. I need to stop this for a bit. I'm gonna go and get on with an essay, and I'll come back. And so that's really I think one of the beautiful things about this film is the fact that it does feel incremental, and it leads you down the rabbit hole. I've often thought it's a bit like Alice in Wonderland, It says, okay, so you believe this, off we come, and this, and then now this. And actually the sense of incremental growth and development in the film possibly comes from the fact that Miyazaki didn't actually have a shooting script when they started. He was doing storyboards, writing the script, even helping with elements of the animation, without a middle and an end to the story in mind. And so, not only is that possibly part of the reason for this sense of development, and next, but also it underlines what feels like a series of obstacles and challenges that Chihiro faces one after the other. First of all, she has to get across a bridge by holding her breath. Haku, the young man, helps her. Then she has to get down some steps and into a boiler room where Kamaji, the boiler man, is waiting for her, and has to convince him to let her into the building. Then she has to convince a very cynical 19-year-old Rin, who actually I had a slight crush on, I have to say. I do like her. Has to convince her to help her up to the top of the building to meet the witch in charge of the bathhouse, Yubaba. Now, again, I'm not going to spoil the specifics of the story, but this idea, this sense of having to overcome these obstacles, is precisely what's at the heart of this film. Chihiro starts as a powerless 10-year-old and must discover, as Miyazaki describes, the energy to live through overcoming these obstacles, fighting the apathy, reclaiming her identity, because literally her name is taken from her by Yubaba, the witch, reclaiming and indeed forging her own sense of agency and her power in this world, her ability to achieve things. That's the whole point of this movie, and it's so beautifully done, so elegantly done, that you barely even notice. And that's one of the most excellent things about this film. My wife and I both firmly love Studio Ghibli films because they're, in so many ways, they have very, very positive messages, especially for women and for young girls, which simply often aren't there in Disney movies. Chihiro isn't a princess. Chihiro isn't a fairy. Chihiro is a little girl who has to girl up, man up, as it were. And it's great, absolutely great. Now, I love the art design in this. It's just achingly beautiful, gorgeous art design, and the fact that there is that sense of reality and realism, the dirt on shoes, the fact that things like chopsticks move when bowls are bumped, this kind of thing, the gears and the cogs of the bathhouse, the mechanism, means that actually I just want to explore and soak up this world whenever I'm there. It's precisely the kind of world which I really enjoy in fantasy and in fiction. It's one which is well thought out, one which has its own internal logic. It doesn't have to be realistic, but it should have a consistency. And the intricacy of this bathhouse, the rooms, the way that the different elements work, is just so gorgeous that I just want to spend my time exploring the place. Now, this brings me to two of my favourite characters, or favourite scenarios, I guess, in this film. The first one is when there's a river spirit or the sludge spirit who comes in to the bathhouse and is desperate to have a wash, and how Chihiro helps this creature get clean. I won't spoil the specifics of it, but it's directly inspired, supposedly, by Miyazaki's experience with his community of trying to clean a local river. There are elements of what was pulled out of the river which are in this animation, in this sequence, and the sense of slippiness and muck and grime, and Chihiro struggling, dragging, wading through the mud to achieve her goal is just superb. So that's a highlight for me. But so too is the character of Faceless. Faceless is such a fascinating character because he's alone. He seems to be invisible to so many people, but he latches on to Chihiro and indeed is let into the bathhouse by her. And all he seems to want is friendship and acceptance. And he sees that he can buy this. He sees that because he can just make gold appear in his hands. That by using gold and giving it to people, that people will give him whatever he wants. That they'll be his friend, that they'll bring him food. And he just goes crazy. He becomes literally a monster. but only because of how the people around him react to him, and because of the fact that he's given license to be overly indulgent, to just have whatever he wants when he wants it. Again, this is possibly part of this theme of Japan and its economy in the 80s and 90s, but also I think there's something very powerful about the fact that this creature, this being, is overwhelmed when it gets what it thinks it wants, and is only really happy when it walks away from that, and actually ends up in a much better place with Granny, a character called Granny, who I'm not going to spoil. Faceless marks such a deep philosophical comment on the status of humanity when it comes to money, friendship, belonging, identity, and yet is also such a dare I say cute, kind of grimly cute character, because he follows Chihiro like a lost puppy. So Faceless is also a real highlight in this film. Now, throughout this movie there are little scenes called M-A, which are moments where nothing really is happening. A character is simply watching maybe the water and the sun glint on it. Perhaps they're observing a train going along this flooded landscape outside the bathhouse. And these serve to, again, anchor us in a sense of reality because of the animation, but also actually to as Miyazaki says, take the tension and the storytelling and then broaden it out a little bit to remind us that actually there is a world, there are moments of calm, and then you take that slightly broadened sense of, again, being invested in the story, and then you move forward with that into the next set piece, into the next tension building bit of story, which again serves this sort of sense of incremental advancement as the story progresses. I love it, and I also love the fact that Miyazaki understands the beauty and the art of stillness. A little bit like in a classical piece of music where silence can be so powerful, so too can actually taking a moment just to look at the world in an animation. So without spoiling the story, Haku becomes ill and Chihiro must go on an adventure to save him. And the only thing I will say about this is the sequence with her on the train with Faceless is some of the most gorgeous animation that I've ever seen. Truly beautiful animation, and also the lamp which greets them off the train, while a little bit Disney-ish, this lamp that sort of hops through the forest and leads them to where they're meant to go, is one of the most delightful things as well that I've ever seen. So I'll leave that there, but obviously the story progresses. But ultimately, out of this story comes again, as Miyazaki says, Chihiro with this energy to live. She's discovered that actually she can take control of her life, that she can affect the world around her, and the fact that she doesn't have to just be a powerless, apathetic and bored creature, that she actually has an identity. And that's precisely the point of this film. When Yubaba the witch takes her name literally in her hand, her identity is taken from her, and it underlines how important it is to be Chihiro. And so Chihiro reclaims that in the course of this film. And by the time we get to the end of the story, and everything's better, as with so many of these films, her parents are like, so, are you ready for a new school? It's going to be scary. It's going to be weird. And she's like, no, I think I can handle this. Now, Spirited Away earned 30.4 billion yen at the Japanese box office, making it the highest grossing film in Japanese film history. I think it outdid Titanic. And in so many ways, this really underlines that this film wasn't just for children. People often call Studio Ghibli films, and indeed Studio Ghibli, the Japanese Disney. And while this is sort of true, there's so much more to a Ghibli film that makes it not only the animation style and the themes, but also actually the importance of the story. I think that's the right word, the importance of what's being said, the fact that there is a message being communicated, more than just a moral, if you see what I mean. There is actually almost a series of questions that you're being asked that makes this film so accessible on so many levels, it was bound to succeed as it did in the Japanese box office. And now, globally, people adore this movie. As soon as possible, I really covet the Spirited Away art book. As soon as possible, I intend to get that book and just look at that art over and over again. But more than this, I just feel honoured and so pleased to have been exposed to this movie. I'm so happy that I did watch it, that I didn't just go, no, I'm too busy, because otherwise I would have been missing out. And actually I have to say, over the years I've lost a couple of copies of this film by lending it to people and never quite getting it back. So never again. This copy is a copy that I'm keeping until the day I croak. Not that I'm not already croaking enough as it is. If there was one negative about the film, I would say that it's the score. Now hear me out. The music is excellent, absolutely excellent, and fits it so well. In fact, I love this music. I have it on my phone. But at times, especially when Chihiro, Faceless, and some other characters are talking, for example, with, shall we say, Granny, the music slightly threatens to swamp what's being said. The emotion and the crescendo of that emotion becomes a little bit too loud, and that's my only complaint really about the film. In that moment it could have been slightly quieter, and we would have got the emotional hit of the music along with what was being said just fine. But it becomes slightly too loud, a little bit like so you're going, yeah, sorry, yeah, can you shut up, quiet, yeah. And, you're sort of fighting with the music a little bit, just a little bit. But that's it really. I mean, for the most part, especially the music which introduces us to the spirit world, and also for example, the music which goes along with things like the radish spirit, is so perfect and so quirky that it's barely a complaint at all. But if there was one thing I could change, I would just change the mix on that scene with Granny. I'd just turn down the music just slightly, and it would just be perfect. So this film is 15 years old, and I could not be more pleased that it exists. I'm just hoping that I get the chance to share this with my children if and when my wife and I have kids. But also I'm hoping that if you haven't seen it, that you'll check it out. If you've heard about this movie, and indeed so many people have heard about it, go out, get a copy and try it out. It's the most delightful and an engaging film that I think you're ever likely to watch, in so much as it will engage you on whatever level you want to be engaged. If you just want to go on an adventure, you can do that. If you want to have a philosophical think fest, you can do that. If you want to marvel at the animation, you can do that. This film is a masterpiece, and I'm so frankly so amazed that it's been around for 15 years, but also so pleased that it's still going strong and that so many people love Spirited Away. It is rightly adored across the world. Anyway guys, I'm going to go before I completely lose my voice. As I say, if you haven't watched this film, definitely give it a go. But as ever, until next time, whatever you get up to, do take care. Bye bye.